This is a teaching moment.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. It's Hesiod. Today we are going to look at the Hunter cards of Forged in the Barrens. And Hunter takes a, let's just say, interesting direction with this expansion. Let's have a look. We're gonna kick things off with Sunscale Raptor. It's a 1-mana 1/3. It's a beast and it reads: Frenzy, shuffle a Sunscale Raptor into your deck with permanent +2/+1. Let's talk about the body. A 1-mana 1/3 it's fine. You play this on turn 1, you are not that afraid that it dies. That's nice, so the body's perfectly fine, you don't mind it at all. The more interesting thing about this card is the effect, because the effect is, I don't want to say it's unique, because we've already seen this, kind of at least. The similarities to Raptor Hatchling are pretty apparent, I think. But I also think this is more like Jade Idol. And Jade Idol is a good card, so this is a good card? We'll see. Also there is Immortal Prelate, which does a very similar thing. Although this buffs itself, and you have to buff Immortal Prelate to make it a threat. And also this is kind of a Dire Frenzy in itself. You don't have to actually play Dire Frenzy on this to get the effect off, but if you want to go really crazy, you can of course do that. Still, this is a very strange card, because the implication is you play this on turn 1. On turn 2, it's very unlikely to kill something, because it just has one attack. So, if you want the Frenzy to go off on turn 2, you have to trade yourself without killing something, and you just trade to activate the Frenzy? This is... I don't think that's very good. So the Frenzy falls off as a mechanic on this, just because the 1-2 curve doesn't really fit the bill here. One thing about the Frenzy though is that gaining attack is nice for a later game. Right? Because you shuffle a 3-4, then you shuffle a 5-5, then you shuffle a 7-6, and that makes the Frenzy going off a little bit easier later on, and that's not too bad, because you want to go infinite with this card, if that makes sense. So that's kind of appealing. But the thing is that shuffling cards into your deck is an absolutely late game mechanic. You can tutor this out, there are ways to do so, like Scavenger's Ingenuity. But the question is, this for some reason takes damage on turn 1 without dying. Okay? So you trade the rest into something and it dies. And then you tutor it out with Scavenger's Ingenuity on 2, and on 3 you play a 1-mana 3/4, which has +2/+2 because of Scavenger's Ingenuity, which makes it a 5/6. So you can play on 3 a 5/6 with a 2-drop alongside. That doesn't sound that doesn't sound bad at all. But as you just heard, the way that things line up, it just doesn't really line up, and I don't think that's feasible for a real game of Hearthstone. The scaling is nice though. You get a 3/4, you get a 5/5, you get a 7/6, and so on and so on. So in that regard, this is pretty much a Jade Idol for Hunter. There are also other synergies that make this card, aside from the Frenzy, not a bad card. So with Don't Feed the Animals, this is pretty good because of the 3 health. You gain +2/+2, the health makes it pretty sturdy. A good play on turn 2 with this, you played this on turn 1, on turn 2 you go Adorable Infestation on this, which makes it a 2/4. And then you trade into something and the Frenzy goes off, and I believe, no, as the card reads, the adorable infestation won't stick, because shuffle a Sunscale Raptor, it's not shuffle this, it's shuffle a Sunscale Raptor, so forget that I said that. It's also quite nice with pack tactics, because just adds another Sunscale Raptor to your pool. I already talked about Scavenger's Ingenuity. Scrap Shots is also something that you might want to play with this, but it's very slow. There is Selective Breeder to help you find this. And I also want to mention, which is in my mind the strongest play with this, Headhunter's Hatchet. Headhunter's Hatchet is a very underestimated card in my mind. It's a 2/3 weapon for 2, that's 6 damage over 3 turns. And with this, with Hellbore, with Wolpertinger, you do have a lot of beasts on turn 1 that you can play, so you can follow up with Headhunter's Hatchet and then trade into something and kill something. And I think that's worth a lot. So I think that the Frenzy isn't that big of a deal, but the 1/3 body is. And all of this points towards this being played. The Frenzy itself point toward a late game plan, which Hunter doesn't want to do. If your idea is, I'm going to play Jade Idol with Hunter with this, is you apply light pressure in the early to mid game, and in the late game you scale out of control and go infinite. But Hunter doesn't want to do this. Hunter does want to kill you as fast as possible, and I think this guy helps doing that. Just because it's a 1/3 and Headhunter's Hatchet and you have secrets and stuff, Petting Zoo and whatever, I think this guy is solid just because of the body, and the Frenzy is flashy but not actually very good. So Sunscale Raptor, solid. Next up we have Warsong Wrangler. It's a 4 mana 3/4. It is not a beast, which is very important actually. And it reads, Battlecry, discover a beast in your deck. Give all copies of it +2/+1, wherever they are. So let's talk about the body first. The body is incredibly weak. You don't actually want to play this. A 4 mana 3/4, that's, particularly in turn 4, unbelievably weak. But it has an upside, and that upside is discovering a beast in your deck, so you can actually fetch something. But before I get into the effect, I want to compare this to Stitch Tracker first. Stitch Tracker was a 3 mana 2/2 that discovered a copy of a card in your deck, of a minion. This is beasts in particular. It has to be a beast. And also Stitch Tracker just adds a copy to your hand. This draws the beast from your deck, thinning it. There are applications in both cases, and I think in this case there are positives and negatives. But before I get ahead of myself, is this a better minion than Stitch Tracker? Yes and no. For 1 more mana you get +1/+2 and you get the buff, which is a very good deal, so this is on the surface a better minion than Stitch Tracker. But the downside is it has such a weak body, and Stitch Tracker on 3 is still more okay than this, because you can still fight back. On turn 4 you will have a lot of trouble using this to trade down or up into something, and it's really weird. But the hand buffing is another plus, so you can discover a rush minion, a rush beast, and come back with that. So it has that going for it. But there's another implication here, because you get to discover something that you actually decided to put in your deck, which is in itself very strong. And also this little lady enables us an OTK in Hunter, in Standard. It's a very fringe and a very weird one, but you can OTK with this. Let me explain. There is another card called Selective Breeder, and you run 2 copies of Selective Breeder, and you run one copy of this, maybe even two, but I think one copy of this is enough. In that deck you run King Crush maybe as your only beast. You can run others too, but you want to fetch for King Crush with this. And also you have in that deck Beastmaster Lerox. So what are you supposed to do with that combo? You selective breeder your King Crush, which adds a copy. It doesn't draw it, it adds a copy to your hand. Then you selective breeder King Crush again. And at some point you play this, fetching your King Crush to hand and giving it +2/+1. And King Crush will be able to attack for 10 damage, and you have 3 of them. So at some point, if your opponent doesn't have a taunt on board, you just play Beastmaster Lerox and then you 30 your opponent. That is actually possible. Sounds good to me. I'm gonna try it for sure. Of course there are other applications with this. We already talked about the card Sunscale Raptor, and Sunscale Raptor also kind of synergizes with this, but I already talked about that. I don't think that is very good. Also there's apparently a very strong synergy with Trampling Rhino. Trampling Rhino with this is pretty good because you can follow up this turn, this weak turn, with Trampling Rhino, dealing damage to the face of the enemy. And that is quite strong actually. I'm not particularly sold on it, but it's fine. On turn 5 you can fetch your Wolpertinger with this and have 2 3/2 Wolpertingers on board alongside. This is also not that great of a play. So is this a good card? If you want to go for the OTK, you have to run this, I think. If you want to OTK your opponent, I think this card is the reason why King Crush is still in the core set. Because they want to give us an opportunity to OTK. But the OTK is not a very good deck, I think. And the other applications... you don't run this in every hunter deck. You just don't. It's too weak for that. But in a controlling environment or an OTK environment, this is a very nice lady to have. Should you craft this epic then? Most likely you shouldn't, because the OTK is not very good. Most likely not very good. But it's fun. And if you have the dust, maybe you want to try it out. Next up is Prospector's Caravan. It's a 2-mana 1/3 and it reads, at the start of your turn, give all minions in your hand +1/+1. I don't want to talk too much about this card because I'm gonna say it right up front. I don't think this is very good. First of all, the body is terrible. Let's talk about the effect. It's a very strange effect that it doesn't buff just beasts but all minions, but that is actually an upside, okay? It's not like that's a downside or anything. So if the effect goes off on one minion, it is already worth it, kind of, because it pays its stats back. But the question is it going to? That is the big question about this card. The killing point of this card is that it's a start of turn effect instead of a end of turn effect. If this was end of turn, this would be considered to be run in a lot of decks, I think. But since the effect is kind of scary, it's really, for the opponent, this is a high priority target, because if it goes off twice, it might actually snowball, and this has therefore pseudo taunt. So the opponent will do everything they can to kill it. And you won't get the effect, and then you will be very sad. If it sticks though, it's still not necessarily game winning, because it's so slow. You have to play the things that it buffed. But it has potential for snowballing, so I'll give it that. For me, the most apparent synergies are Trampling Rhino. Actually, that's the most apparent one for me, but you can't really follow up things with this. It's really strange. It goes in a slow mid-range deck, and I don't know if Hunter is the class to do so. So, bah. Don't craft this. You can disenchant this, I think. Next up we have Piercing Shot. It's a 4-mana spell and reads, deal 6 damage to a minion. Excess damage hits the enemy hero. So, this is a pretty straight up card, I think. You would say this is Fireball for Hunter. And I would argue no, this is Explosive Runes for Hunter, and you decide where it goes. So Explosive Runes is a good secret in Wild, isn't it? Yeah, that's because it's in Mage and has secret synergies. Let's just talk about the upside of this card first of all. I think this card is very efficient because you don't waste damage, okay? You kill something and excess damage hits the enemy face, which you want as a hunter because you want to kill your opponent as fast as possible. That's an upside for sure. The thing is though, if you compare this with Fireball, Fireball goes face with all 6 damage. As a hunter you want all of this damage to hit face, but you can't. You have to kill a 1-hit thing to have 5 damage hit face, and that's not very efficient at all, although the card itself is actually efficient, so it kind of contradicts itself. This is a little bit strange. Also another downside is it's so expensive. It's 4 mana. Fireball does see some play. At the beginning of Hearthstone it was everywhere. But nowadays 4 mana is so late. It's very slow. And this on top of that is a reactive card. Not so much of a proactive card. You remove something. And you don't want to do that as a hunter. So that's a little bit, yeah, I guess. So I guess that's a little bit disappointing. The only thing saving this is that it's additional reach for Hunter. Hunter lost Kill Command, but this is so much worse than Kill Command was. So I don't really know. So you play this in an aggressive to mid-range deck. So the question actually becomes, do you run this in an aggressive deck because it doesn't hit face as much as you want to, and it's so slow? But on the other hand, you don't have much reach as a hunter other than this. So I think you actually, if you run an aggressive hunter, you have to slot this in, although you don't really want to. It's a little bit lacking. But what you're gonna do, this is what Hunter has in his arsenal right now. So, okay, we'll take it, I guess. Next up, we have Wound Prey. Deal 1 damage, summon a 1/1 hyena with Rush. So this is kind of an interesting spell, but first of all, it's a straight up power creep on the hunt. On the hunt never saw play. Will this see play because of the Rush? That is to be seen. An upside on this thing is that it's quite efficient in itself. It suggests that you go for a tempo play, but that tempo play might be awkward sometimes because dealing 2 damage for 1 mana is efficient, but you have to split up the damage and maybe you damage something for 1 mana and then there's a taunt in the way, so you can't finish it off because of the taunt and stuff. So it might not always be the way to go. An upside this has is that it is additional burn. In Wild, Malygos Hunter has more tools thanks to this. You have a lot of 1 mana spells that deal damage now in Wild, and this is a nice addition to that, but it never was good, so that is also not that much of a positive for this card. The downside on this is that it's very low impact. Arcane Shot is quite similar and never really saw play except for Face Hunter, and Face Hunter would rather run Arcane Shot than anyone would run this because the hyena is just rush not charge. Also, it's a terrible top deck. But the rush thing, that's of course an upside. Other upsides are the synergies it implies, because there is a new card that we are going to talk about in a minute, which is Kolkar Pack Runner. And Kolkar Pack Runner is very good with this card. Also, I want to mention Professor Slate, because this plus Professor Slate on turn 4 lets you kill a thing and build up a board. That is quite nice, actually. Another thing is Overwhelm. Overwhelm doesn't see really play, but this makes it that Overwhelm deals 3 damage and you get a 1/1 hyena with rush, so you can deal 4 damage on turn 2. That might be good, but it's very reactive and not what Hunter actually wants to do. So you want to run this in an aggressive to mid-range deck, and it might be an addition, but I think it's too low impact to do so, I don't really think this will see play unless Kolkar Pack Runner really takes off, which I don't think is going to be the case, but we're gonna talk about this in a minute. Next up we have Tame Beast. This is another ranked spell, the one for Hunter, and it reads: summon a 2/2 beast with rush. If you wait until turn 5, you will summon a 4/4 with rush, and if you wait until turn 10, you will summon a 6/6 with rush. I actually think this is the best of the ranked spells. But let me explain first. When I saw this card, the first thing that I thought was, yes, this is Clear the Way done right. This is the way that Clear the Way should have been from the beginning. Also, it is kind of similar to Coordinated Strike, I think, or Voltaic Burst. And Voltaic Burst did see a little bit of play, but more because of the overload. Coordinated Strike doesn't see play, but that is because it's a controlling tool in Demon Hunter, and Demon Hunter wants to be aggressive. Another thing that came to my mind is Underbelly Fence. Underbelly Fence saw some play and is a very efficient minion. It's a very good minion, and this has another restriction. Underbelly Fence wants you to play Thief Rogue, or at least some cards that support Underbelly Fence, and Underbelly Fence can come down on turn 2. This can come down on turn 2 as well, but then it's very inefficient. If you wait until turn 5, this becomes very efficient. Another card that is very similar is, in my mind, Unleash the Beast. And Unleash the Beast saw play at the beginning, mostly because of Zul'jin. This is a very good card, Zul'jin, by the way. Later on it didn't, but that is because it's so expensive. This is very cheap. Tame the Beast is a 2-mana spell. 2 mana is not too much to ask for, especially in the later stages of the game. So it has that going for it. But since rank 1 is quite inefficient, in a pinch you will play it before turn 5. But I think this card urges you to wait. You want this to be at least a 4/4. If it's a 2/2, it's going to die. As a 4/4 on turn 5, it's very likely to survive and pose a problem for your opponent, which will make him trade inefficiently into it, so you go 2 for 1. At rank 1, you are very unlikely to go 2 for 1. If you do, good for you. Third rank doesn't really play a role, I think, because you don't want to go that long. But if you do a 6/6 rush for 2 mana, that's insane. That is really good. I think this is a very good card. So you can swing the board in your favor very nicely, and it's very cheap. That makes it a good card already. But it also has additional synergies. Most foremost, it's also Kolkar Pack Runner. Kolkar Pack Runner loves this card. Kolkar Pack Runner can down... I'm gonna talk about it in a second anyway, so let's not get ahead of ourselves. And I also want to mention once again Overwhelm. This is pretty good with Overwhelm, I think. Also Wound Prey is kind of a supporting card for this. So nice card. You want to play this in a mid-range deck, you want to play this in a control deck, you want to play this in an OTK deck, but it's definitely not an aggressive card. It can be, but it's best in a controlling mid-rangey OTK-ish environment, I think. So thumbs up for this one, very, very solid. Next up, as promised, is Kolkar Pack Runner. It's a 2-mana 2/3, and it says after you cast a spell, summon a 1/1 hyena with Rush. So, let's talk about the body. A 2-mana 2/3, that's okay. You can play this on turn 2. Great. So, it also has an upside, right? Okay, let's talk about the effect. This is a Violet Teacher, but way better than a Violet Teacher. Violet Teacher saw play at the beginning of Hearthstone and fell off afterwards because it's too expensive. This is just 2 mana. Also, this guy has the ability to swing the board back for you, because the things that he summons have Rush. And that is worth a lot, I think. The thing is, if you tempo this out on turn 2, I don't think you want to actually play this on turn 2 because it's so valuable. And the opponent will do everything in their power to remove this. So, although it has a nice body, I don't actually think that you want to play this on turn 2 because you want to take advantage of the effect, because the effect is actually very, very good. But the effect also demands you to play cheap spells at the same time, which is a little bit awkward. So let's talk about that downside for a second. If you want to play a lot of cheap spells, that means that you have a lot of cheap spells that are quite low impact. They are very bad as top decks in the mid to late game, and that weakens this card also a little bit. If you want to play this guy, I think if you play 2 cheap spells alongside, then he's worth it. So you want to play this maybe on turn 4 with 2 1-mana spells. The thing is though, you swing back the board and then you have a 2/3 which is nice, but then you will have expended your hand. And the big thing about this guy is that he actually demands card draw, and the one thing that Hunter lacks is card draw. Violet Teacher was so good in Rogue back in 2014-15 because Rogue has enough card draw and Hunter lacks that. So this is a point that is holding back this guy, but it might still be worth it. It's just too solid to write off, I think. It's quite a solid card. So what are the cheap spells you want to play with this? Maybe you want to play Resizing Pouch, which is a value card, which you don't run in an aggressive deck, more in a mid-range one. Maybe you want to run this with Demon Companion. Demon Companion is not just a pure aggro card. You can run Demon Companion in almost any deck because it's so efficient. You run this with Adorable Infestation. Adorable Infestation is an aggressive card. So in an aggressive deck, you can run this with Overwhelm. I know I sound like a broken record because I keep coming back to Overwhelm, but I think it's underrated. Tracking is very good with this because it's also card draw. I think Tracking is the best spell you can play with this guy. And since you run Tracking, maybe you run Lock and Load. Maybe you run a Jag and Load Hunter. This would fit very well into that archetype, I think. It's screaming for that archetype actually. So you want to run Yogg and this, and then maybe a bunch of spells, something reactive, and then you just want to jam Yogg. Maybe. So since it's so flexible, it goes in aggressive decks as a refill. You get wiped out, the opponent takes care of your board, then you jam this bad boy and then you just spam your hand and have another board. That's pretty much okay. It's good in a mid-range deck. It's good in Secret Hunter as well. Secrets aren't that cheap, but they are cheap enough that you can actually think about this, guys. So there's a lot of implications with this. Very flexible card. I think this is very, very solid, and you will consider this whenever you build a Hunter deck. The next minion we're going to talk about is Barak Kodobane. It's a 3-mana 3/3 beast. So the body, a 3-mana 3/3, is okay. It has also the upside of being a beast. Hunter doesn't care that much about that anymore, but I think in the future it will once again, because beasts are so iconic for Hunter. Let's talk about the effect. When I see this, I think about a lot of other minions that have already been printed, and this is still different and it's better. Let me explain. The first thing that came to my mind was Messenger Raven. Messenger Raven never saw play, but that is because the 2 health is just not enough. It's not sticky enough. You gain value, but nah, it's not good enough. Another thing that comes to mind for me is Blink Fox, and Blink Fox saw some play because it's good enough. Stonehill Defender comes to mind. There is Cabal Courier. There is Bronze Explorer. There's Chittering Tunneler. There is the closest one to this, Volpara Scoundrel. And Volpara Scoundrel didn't see any play anymore because the 2 attack was not enough, but this guy has 3 attack. I think this is the best Discover minion that Blizzard ever printed. It's super interesting and flexible. Why is that, you might ask? First of all, the battle cry is really insane. You get to choose between a beast, a secret, and a weapon. The beast part might not be that exciting, but sometimes you will discover King Crush and then you will hit the opponent in the face for 8 the next turn and win the game. That's going to be hilarious. Sometimes you will discover an Ironbeak Owl to silence a taunt and push for lethal. That's okay. The crazy part is secrets and weapons. After the rotation there are only 5 secrets left in the pool, which means this guy will almost always get you what you need. Even better are weapons. There are only 4 weapons left after the rotation. You will almost always discover, not always, but 25% of the time you will discover Rinling's Rifle. And that is such a great follow-up to Barak Kodobane. That's just insane. Sphere of Sapience is not a great thing, but I already rambled about Headhunter's Hatchet, and this guy can get it. It's a beast, so it activates Headhunter's Hatchet. That's also pretty insane. So I think the weapon part is the best part about this, but the secret part is not bad either. So this guy seems like almost just upside and no downside. It has very good stats and the effect is just crazy almost. I claim it has such a nice effect that you just run this bad boy. The only downside is it better than Petting Zoo? Petting Zoo is such a strong card. Making a 6/6 on turn 3 is sometimes just devastating and game winning. And also there is another thing, because you don't get to discover a spell, just a secret, this doesn't save you in some parts of the game, because sometimes you just need removal and this won't provide it. So that's kind of a downside. But all in all, I think I don't want to talk too much about the synergies, because this guy is so flexible. This beast is such a beast. It's so versatile. This goes in every hunter deck, even in a secret hunter deck. It's really strong there too, because you get to discover a secret And Riling's Rifle, I think this guy is a staple going forward in every hunter deck. You just put this in there. Unless you want to play the OTK deck that I mentioned at the beginning. But wow, what a card, man. You craft this golden, okay? You get additional value if you craft this golden because the card that you discover is going to be golden as well. The next one is a legendary that actually earned that rank because it's very, very spicy, and we have to talk about Tavish Stormpike. Tavish Stormpike is a 3-mana legendary, has a 2/5 body, and it reads, after friendly beast attacks, summon a beast from your deck that costs 1 less. Very interesting. First of all, the body. A 2/5 is actually pretty sticky. I think you can just tempo this out on turn 3 without even the effect, and maybe you can get this to trigger on turn 4, but about that a little bit later. So the body is pretty good. Let's talk about the effect, because the effect is not easy to wrap your head around. After friendly beast attacks, summon a beast from your deck that costs 1 less. So that is already kind of specific. I had to think really hard about things that are similar. And I came up with Face Stalker. I came up with Mad Scientist. I came up with Maxima. I came up with Mysterious Challenger. And a little bit Allura. And I think the closest one is Finja. So you might say, but they read totally differently, Hesiod. What are you talking about? I think that these things are very similar because this guy actually reads Recruit a Beast. Face Stalker reads Recruit a Secret. What is Recruit? Recruit is you don't just draw the card, but you put it into play immediately. And this is what this guy does and what his strength is actually. So you not just get card draw, but immediate tempo. And that is very strong, and you mustn't underestimate how strong this effect can be. What is it that makes Tavish actually even better than those guys? Except for Face Stalker. Face Stalker is so threatening because it comes down early, like this guy. Turn 3 is pretty early, and it has an ongoing effect if you don't remove it. So that is in itself already pretty good. And I think that Face Stalker is quite a bit weaker than this because it's just secrets. This has more implication because beasts have more variety than secrets. Talk about the on-curve dream with this. The on-curve dream is you have a 2-mana beast in play on turn 3, you slam Tavish, and then you attack. What are even 2-mana beasts? That's Scavenging Hyena, that is Direwolf, that is Mana Feeder Panthera, and River Croc, and there is another guy, a new guy, something Thrasher, I think. So there is actually a little bit of a selection of 2-mana beasts that you can take advantage of with this guy. Is that good though? The best thing that I can come up with you can summon after having attacked with a 2-mana beast is actually Stone Tusk Boar. Unironically, Stone Tusk Boar won't summon a 0-mana beast because there is none right at the moment, but it's still pretty much a nice tempo play because you get to remove something for free. So this guy becomes deal 2 damage on top of that to something on the opponent's side of the board. That is not bad. It's not super amazing, not game winning, but it's very swingy. It draws you a card, it thins your deck from a bad card, and that I think is already quite strong. The absolute dream would be, for some reason you have a Trampling Rhino on board on turn 6, and then you play Tavish. Tavish takes advantage of the Trampling Rhino. The Trampling Rhino pulls a Magnathal Lion. Then you can immediately attack with the lion, and after having attacked with the lion you pull Zigzor. And then you can attack with Zigzor, and Zigzor pulls a 2-mana beast, which could be Direwolf Alpha, which could be Scavenging Hyena, whatever. And that is the absolute dream, but I think that is really unrealistic and is not going to happen. It's going to happen, but in 99% of the time you are not going to go for that play, because it's super narrow and very unlikely to happen. So the downside of this guy is he has very narrow application, and the stars have to align for this guy. So if you want to play this on turn 3 and take advantage of the effect, you have to have a 2-mana beast on board already. And also still something in deck that is 1 mana and worth pulling, because pulling a Wolpertinger with this is not amazing. Pulling the 1/3 that we talked about at the beginning, that's a different story. Stone Tusk Boar is actually quite okay, I think. The upside is this guy is card draw that puts cards immediately into play, and that is very strong. You can't underestimate the power of card draw, and you can't underestimate the power of recruit. So the synergies are pretty apparent. You want beasts that rush, but there aren't that many left, so the application is very narrow with this guy. So even if you get to pull out what he does, you are not necessarily winning the game. It's something that your opponent can come back from, because the rest of your deck is quite weak. Right now I think you can do more powerful things with Hunter, and as time goes on this guy will become stronger. Right now it's more of a good tech card, a solid card that you will consider, but you don't necessarily run in a Hunter deck. Last but definitely not least is Barak Kodobane. Yeah, Barak. So before I start, I want to say that I think if you want to craft one legendary in Hunter, if you can't afford more, then you should craft this guy. Let me explain. Okay, let me first of all, it's a 5-mana 3/5, reads Barak Kodobane, Battlecry, draw 1, 2, and 3 cost spell. Let that sink in for a second. So if we talk about the body, we don't really have to do that, because we all know 5-mana 3/5 is exceptionally bad. You don't play that, particularly in Hunter, usually. You don't play that kind of stuff. When I saw this guy, I thought about one card, and that is Tolvir Warden. It also kind of reminds me of Subject 9, but that is a little bit different, I think. This is more like Tolvir Warden. Why is that, you might ask? The thing is, this guy tutors things. It pulls 3 spells from your deck that can help you immediately, or just thin your deck, and that is a very powerful effect. Card draw in Hunter is very rare, and I remember when Tolvir Warden was revealed back in the days, everybody went nuts over it. Oh my god, Hunter gets card draw. And it's very rare that Hunter gets card draw. It's very specific, and this guy draws you 3 things that are very impactful, or can be. So his effect is very, very, very spell centric. It's a 1-mana, 2-mana, and 3-mana spells, and you must immediately ask, what even can I get from this guy? And the answer is, in the 1-mana spot there's Tracking, there's Adorable Infestation, there is Demon Companion, and there's Jargenload that you can get with this guy. On 2-mana there are all the secrets. Pretty much all the secrets, and Quick Shot. Also Tame Beast that we already talked about, which is also a very strong spell that you can pull with this guy. So that might already be enough to argue about this. But on top of that, you get a 3-cost spell. And the strongest one right now, I think, is Petting Zoo. So if you can pull a secret and Petting Zoo with this, that's so insane. They synergize so well together. Also on 3 mana there is Deadly Shot still, which in a Control Hunter might be relevant because you want to remove something big. So there's not that much to talk about this. This guy is almost just upside. It's just card draw in Hunter. And you don't get that. In this case we did. And let's embrace that for a second. Of course he has the downside that he has such a bad body. It's so incredibly slow and expensive. You pay 5 mana to do this. And sometimes you just can't because it's way too slow. And this is something that holds Barak back, unfortunately. A little bit about the synergies. Apparently you want to run this in the same deck as Kolkar Pack Runner. Kolkar Pack Runner with this is very good. Although it's very slow, but if you can follow up with Kolkar and a bunch of spells, that might save you. You want to run this in a secret deck for sure, because it gets you Petting Zoo and your secrets, and maybe Tracking or Adorable Infestation. Secret decks are usually very aggressive, and you want the Adorable Infestation, you want the Demon Companion in there, I think. So the slowness of this card makes up for the synergy with the secrets. And a Lock and Load Hunter. So if you play Lock and Load, you want this guy. It's what feeds Lock and Load. It's a very good card in that deck. So you want to play this in an OTK deck also maybe, because it might pull your pieces together. All in all, I think this is maybe not a meta-defining or deck-defining card, but it's super solid. And I think it's better than, right now at least, it's better than Tavish. And if you can only afford one Hunter Legendary, it should be this one. Unless you just play face decks. Then you better craft Tavish, but Tavish is not that great in face decks either. I don't think you play him there. Great card. So all in all, I think that Hunter got some pretty nice cards in this expansion. But after the rotation, Hunter is going through a lot of changes. It's really weird because Hunter used to be this phase class, and after the rotation that might actually be changing, because Demon Hunter maybe does this better, Rogue does this better than Hunter, which is kind of weird. At the same time, you get a lot of strange toys to play around. Hunter goes through a lot of weird stuff right now. It's like after a breakup, losing Kill Command, losing Animal Companion might be devastating for a soul. And Hunter has to find a way to get out of this. We will see what's going to happen. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next time.